Annually, we launch a competition for WI members linked to the Not in My Name campaign. And this year's competition was to design a banner depicting the campaign. We received 18 entries, and hopefully you've had a chance to view these in the Oriel on your arrival. But now comes the time to announce officially the winners, and I'm delighted to announce the winners this year as Minera WI Craft Group in Llywelyn Federation, and the banner can be seen over there. That's number one. Number two, on my left-hand side, is the second place, which is Macon WI's Craft Group in Gwent Federation. And in third prize, the one furthest from us, is from Alston WI, Cumbria Cumberland Federation. So the competition is now spread into England as well. So we've got numerous banners from England as well as Wales. So please do go and have a look. There are a few up there that came highly commended because it was so difficult to make a choice. Normally, we'd welcome the members who actually made the banner to come and receive their award today. However, due to the vagaries of the weather over the weekends, and the even greater vagaries of British Rail, they were due to be here, but they couldn't make the trip down. So it's a very big thank you. They are watching online, and they are Janice James, Anne Hughes, Rachel Hills, Naomi Burton, Denise Kingsnorth, and Amanda Dutton, Karen Brooker, and Julie Harrison. We're so sorry that you can't be with us today. Very, very well done. Your banner is really hard-hitting. And I hope you're enjoying just watching by link today. It's so sad you can't be with us, but it doesn't detract from the excellent banner that you've produced. So thank you very, very much for that. So I'm now going to ask Joyce to chair the next bit of the agenda. So it's over to you, Joyce.
Thank you. We're really delighted to be joined by a panel of experts who are going to focus on the issues of online harm and the impact it has on women and girls. The online abuse of women is an increasingly serious and growing problem. Women are 27 times more likely to be harassed online than are men, and in a Girl Guiding UK's Girls' Attitude Survey in 2024, 77% of girls and young women aged 7 to 21 said they've experienced online harm in the last year, and 57% of 17 to 21-year-olds said they know a girl their age who's experienced sexual harassment online. Our panel members will be invited to reflect on the current situation and challenges, share their research, projects and campaigns to relating to online harm, and challenge inappropriate attitudes and behaviours. And you need also to highlight any calls to action or potential solutions to address online harm and to help eradicate violence against women and girls.
Well, our first speaker today is having to join us online, unfortunately, Professor Olga Juras. She's Professor of Law at the Open University UK and Director for the Centre for Protecting Women Online, an interdisciplinary unit focusing on research, policy, engagement, and creating social impact in relation to women's online safety. Her research expertise is in international law, human rights, legal responses to violence against women, including online violence, and feminist approaches to governance of online spaces and online safety. Since 2024, she served as an independent expert to the Council of Europe Committee of Experts on combating technology-facilitated violence against women and girls. So, providing our link is running, okay, I'm pleased to welcome Professor Olga Duras.
Boreda, good morning. It's a pleasure to be here, and thank you so much for this kind introduction. I'm really sorry I can't be joining you in person today. I would have loved to be in Wales again, given that I've lived there for quite some time. I used to study in Aberystwyth University, but hopefully another time. I'm going to share my presentation with you, which hopefully you can see. So as we are about to celebrate the White Ribbon Day and also mark 16 days of activism and this year that is focused on saying no excuse for online abuse, I thought it would be really good to use the space that I was given today to reflect not only on online violence against women in general and in global context, but also to focus on online violence against women in Wales. A couple of years ago, I carried out a major study in the UK focusing on online violence against women, and that of course included Wales as well. It was a 4-nation study. So I'll be drawing on some of these findings today to really show that when we're talking about online abuse, online violence against women, we are talking about a phenomenon that is very much global, but it does have very much local impact. But before we begin, perhaps first a little bit of unpacking what it is that we're actually talking about. And online abuse, online violence against women is a broader form of violence that I refer to as technology-facilitated violence against women and girls. And what you see right now is just really a broad picture of some of the forms. This is not exhaustive. Some of the forms of online and tech-facilitated abuse that women and girls, increasingly girls, are facing day in and day out worldwide. Some of the forms of violence and abuse that you see on this slide are prohibited by law. Some, like misogyny, have existed for millennia and now are also manifesting in the online space. But also as technology and AI develops at a speed much faster than law and policy, I think, ever could, we also see new forms of violence against women and girls rising every day, evolving in its new forms and at a scale. And irrespective of their legal status, whether they are prohibited by law or whether they are forming part of the group of what we now call harmful but not illegal behaviors, these forms of violence affect women and girls worldwide, and they do have profound impact on their lives. Also, the numbers that we see concerning the scale of online violence against women are quite concerning. In 2020, it was estimated that 38% of women globally personally experienced online violence, and 65% have witnessed it. Nearly 3 in 4 female journalists have experienced online violence, and 15% of women across the UK have said that they've experienced online violence at least once in their life. And although online tech-facilitated violence is happening in mostly online spaces, the costs of these forms of violence are very, very real. Back in 2021, European Parliament estimated that overall costs of just cyber harassment and just cyber stalking, which are only 2 forms of online violence against women, the cost of these to the EU are estimated between 48 and nearly 90 billion euros. And it's also important to note that whilst we're talking about violence that is committed using technology, it's occurring in online spaces. It is very much a continuum of a broader problem of violence against women and girls. In other words, it is not that what happens online just stays online and does not translate to other forms of violence that are happening to women in offline spaces. The nature of online violence is that it can catch us everywhere. It can catch us at home, on the street, at work, in school. It's everyday, and its impacts are felt by very real persons. I wanted to draw your attention to some of the findings from my study that focused specifically on Wales. When I carried out this survey in 2023, 17% of women in Wales said that they experienced online violence at least once in their life. The likely number is actually higher, given that not all forms of online violence are prohibited by law, and very often women are experiencing harmful behaviors, but these are sometimes not yet named in law as harmful. Also, 17% of men said they have witnessed online violence against women. Amongst those women who experience online violence, 83% said that it had impact on their lives. And this is where I think we bridge the topic of online harm and the real effects that online violence has on women and girls. What the survey has shown is that predominant impact that women are reporting is on their mental health and well-being, which of course makes it also a public health issue. It's not just about tweets that may be perceived to be negative. It's not just about individual feeling a little down because of the comments they received online. These forms of violence are very real and they do have impact. Most concerning for me, perhaps, is the silencing effect of online violence. And I have found that, particularly amongst younger women, aged 16 to 24, 38% have said that online violence had a negative impact on their social life. And also 35% said that as a result of online violence they experienced, they chose not to express their views online. This is, of course, hugely concerning when we're talking about women's participatory rights, about women's participation in political and public life, and ultimately quality of our democracy. So I think we were asked to do maybe not a call for action, but perhaps point towards some of the opportunities ahead. And I would like to finish my presentation doing just that. First of all, I'm an international lawyer, so I would feel really bad if I didn't point towards some of the international standards in that sphere. And both the CEDAW committee and the Grevio committee that overlooks the implementation of the Istanbul Convention, both of these bodies have now spoken openly about technology-facilitated gender-based violence, and that state obligations also extend to these forms of violence. International mechanisms surrounding those bodies and the international conventions that they are attached to are really an opportunity, particularly I think at the governmental level, to frame action on technology-facilitated gender-based violence. But as I said before, we're talking about a global problem with very local impact or localized impact. And I can't really stress enough the importance of local in tackling that global issue. It is absolutely crucial that we raise local awareness about different forms of technology-facilitated violence across age groups, across different demographics. There is no excuse for not talking about it and not doing so. If we can't name it, we can't tackle it. It's as simple as that. It's also important that we promote challenging or the culture of challenging online abuse and specifically online misogyny, and stressing that it is not just something neutral. It's not something that we can ignore, whether it is happening offline or online. And last but not least, I think it's crucial to join in across sectors, across different societal groups, to advocate for local, for devolved, as well as national initiatives to prevent technology-facilitated violence and to fund it appropriately through law, policy, education, and also support programs. I am going to finish here. Thank you very much for your attention, and I look forward to joining the panel.
For those slides that you've shared with us, for the research. And the thing that struck me was it's a continuum of violence against women, and it's intrusive, it's unrelenting, and it has a public health cost. So thank you for that, and there will be discussions by others. But it gives me great pleasure now to introduce Jane Hutt, and she is Cabinet Secretary for Social Justice. She's a long-standing advocate for women and a long-standing friend for this particular event. She became the first National Coordinator of Welsh Women's Aid back in 1978 and went to become the first Director of Chwarae Teg in 1992. And since Jane has been elected, which was way back in 1999, she has become our longest standing minister, probably in the UK, if not much wider than that. But Jane is dedicated absolutely to doing something in this space, and she's got a lifetime's work to prove that. Over to you, Jane.
Well, Barada Ehigid, good morning to you all, and thank you so much, Joyce. Thank you for those very kind words, but also thank you to you, Joyce Watson, our Senedd Equalities Commissioner, for sponsoring this year's event once again. And can I pay tribute to Joyce Watson for championing this really important Not in My Name campaign. And I think next week we're going to be going to join that, which Joyce very much established, that wonderful procession and event, interfaith event at Llandaff Cathedral, and I don't think many of you will join us there as well. But thank you, Joyce. I don't think women are very, very good at congratulating and thanking each other enough, and I'm really pleased that I can say this about Joyce and about Jill as well, because Jill Rundle, Chair of the National Federation of Women's Institutes. I mean, you and Joyce are a powerful team, have brought us all together today. I mean, it is sobering, though, isn't it, to come together again once more in so many ways in which we would wish we didn't have to come together because of the endemic violence against girls and women bringing us together. But it actually does give us the opportunity, as it will tonight in our vigil, to strengthen our resolve in every capacity that we have, particularly those with any power or responsibility, to address this issue. It's great we've got our panellists here today, and I know Matt, who will probably be still here when I have to leave, really thank you from the Welsh Government, but also Lynn Elliott, Chief Executive of White Ribbon UK. And I also, it's always the way that you come to events like this and learn so much more. So thank you to Professor Olga Juratz. I'm actually going to now follow that up with a meeting with you, Olga, so that we can really embed those opportunities for taking this forward into Welsh Government action. So the Not in My Name campaign was established, of course, as we heard, with the aim of raising awareness that violence against women should never be accepted, ignored, or excused. And the campaign will be promoted during the 16 days of activism, and particularly links with White Ribbon Day on the 25th of November as the call to men for allyship. I love the outcome of the Not in My Name banner competition, and again that's thanks to Joyce and to Jill and National Federation of Women's Institutes. What a brilliant campaign, coming from Wales, of course, as so many good things do, and looking at these banners here today, and also spreading now outside of Wales. They are fantastic, and I hope we can make sure that we can all use them effectively. But let's just focus for a moment on allyship. It's about men and boys actively coming together to say collectively, not in my name, against men's violence against women, and refusing to use, excuse, or remain silent about it. But it calls for behavioural and cultural change, and that any social attitudes that excuse violence or shift responsibility from perpetrators to victims must be challenged. And we're talking today about one of the critical components in that change, online abuse and sexual harassment, and how we can move away from a focus on criminal justice responses and instead focus on primary prevention, education, culture change, with particular emphasis on engaging men and boys as allies. And when we think of violence against women and girls, too often we think of physical assault in the home, stalking in the street, coercive control behind closed doors. These, of course, are very real and urgent, but we must also recognise that shift, as Joyce has said, it shifts always, doesn't it? That power control now shifts into digital spaces, opening up new arenas of harm, spaces where misogyny, harassment, image-based abuse and sexual harassment happen at scale, often under-enforced, often unseen, often minimised. And these harms are very much a form of violence against women, domestic abuse and sexual violence, and they matter because they reinforce a culture where women are subject to abuse, harassment, degradation, often simply because of their gender. They signal to men and boys that abusive and harassing behaviour is tolerated or invisible. They sit upstream of more severe physical violence, the same attitudes, power imbalances, gender norms that make harassment possible also make abuse and violence possible. And crucially, if we're serious about ending violence against women and girls, we can't ignore the online dimension. So it isn't so important that we're focusing on this today. Women and girls face disproportionate risks online, including misogyny, harassment, image-based sexual abuse, such as the non-consensual sharing of intimate images, cyber-stalking, and other technology-facilitated violence against women. And as I said, thank you so much to Olga. And no excuse for online abuse. I think that's got to be the theme we take away. No excuse for online abuse. Social media and tech companies must protect users from online harms. Let that be a call from today. That's a strong, simple call to social media and tech companies. That they must protect users from online harms, such as hateful and misleading content. And sadly, some of these platforms have shown little intention of keeping users safe from hate. I'm continuing to work with Ofcom, the UK online safety regulator, to understand how they will use their new powers to keep Welsh residents safe. I'm very pleased that, in fact, as being MS for the Vale of Glamorgan, my colleague Kanishka Nerian MP is now the Minister for not only artificial intelligence but also online safety, and I'm going to be talking to him directly about this minister to minister. It's vital to stress that the responsibility for safety must not fall on survivors. The onus is on platforms, developers, regulators and society as a whole to protect, to prevent harm and create safer online spaces. But I do think we all need to make this call, particularly to Ofcom. Is it going to be strong enough? Are they going to regulate? Are they going to monitor the impact of their new powers? Many online harms never get reported. They don't get reported to the police, to employers, to schools, and to parents. And we need to open up the workforce, and I know this is a strong role that trade unions play as well, to ensure that we say you can report, you must report. And the behaviours can cause significant harms, as Olga has said, in both immediate and long term. It can result in self-harm, suicide, depression, anxiety, withdrawal from daily activities, those social activities, and they can't continue. So as we mark White Ribbon Day and enter the 16 days of activism, let us be clear, this is not only about wearing the ribbon, posting on social media, or a one-off event. It is about recommitting to change. Let us pledge together that harassment that women face online, the microaggressions, the image-based abuse, the misogynist commentary, will not be dismissed as harmless or just social media stuff. We will call it by its name, gendered violence and harassment. And let us commit to educating ourselves, our children and our colleagues about how digital abusive behaviour significantly and detrimentally impacts others. So wonderful to have Mount Stewart Square, our school, with us here today, because they are the children that we need to work with and support. Let's hold to account platforms and services that don't behave responsibly. Take personal responsibility in our everyday digital lives. We can call out harassment and intervene where appropriate online. Let us encourage male allyship, support men to speak out against violence to women and girls, both online and in their everyday lives. Online abuse and sexual harassment are not separate from violence against women and girls. They're part of it, a part which is ever growing as our lives become increasingly digital. Because the truth is this: we cannot end violence against women and girls by only responding after the harm has occurred. We must stop it from happening in the first place. Diolch yn fawr.
Thank you, Jane, and there'll be a really lively discussion. So we're now joined by Lynn Elliott, and she's Chief Executive Officer of White Ribbon UK. Lynn has spent over 17 years as a charity CEO, leading organisations across the third sector with particular focus on social justice, health and advocacy. Her work has supported young people, survivors of sexual violence, older adults, and people with learning disabilities. And I think that reflects a deep commitment to equity and inclusion. Over to you, Lynn.
So, Baradar, and good morning. I'm timing myself because I'm not good at stopping when I'm supposed to stop. So somebody wave at me if we've gone past 8 minutes. And thank you for having me. Can we have have I got a clicker for the next slide? Does this do something? Yes! I've got my own clicker, all the powers in my hands. Okay, so Olga has already talked quite a lot about the definition of violence against women and girls online. This slide just gives you a bit of an example of why, when we're talking about violence against women and girls, we talk about men's violence against women and girls. Not all men are violent, by no means, but the majority of violence is carried out by men, and the majority of victims are women. So just bearing that in mind as we talk about this topic, and also bearing in mind it is a difficult topic for us all to talk about and listen to, so please look after yourselves and take a break if you need to. Oh, you see, I thought I had all the power and then it didn't work when I clicked. So you've had a definition already from Olga about what online violence is. This definition that's up on the slide now is from the Council of Europe, and already it is really out of date. And I guess that just illustrates how fast this is all moving, how fast online violence is moving. There isn't anything wrong with what it says on that slide, cyber harassment, revenge porn, threats of rape, and how it's kind of noticing how it can come away offline into the real world from online. There's nothing in there about AI. There's nothing in there about violent porn. We've just recently had some legislation on the 4th of November about violent pornography with strangulation in it, and that has come into play because we've had lots of incidents of non-fatal strangulation happening in real life, with some very serious consequences. So it's moving very quickly, and I guess that's the thing you take from Olga and from everybody else who's talking. It's moving very fast. We need to start moving very fast, and we're not moving at all at the moment. Why does it matter? It matters because it is an equality issue. It limits women's rights to express themselves equally, freely, and without fear online. And because they can't do that online, that also means they can't always do that in real life. So it does affect women disproportionately. It does affect men as well. And violence is there. It affects everybody. I don't think we can say it doesn't. Young boys watching violent porn, that is affecting them. The consequences of it are greater for women, I think, at the moment, and that is a concern. It really stops us from participating in political, social and cultural life, but that translates into real life, doesn't it? Because if we do anything as women, if we stick our head up above the parapet, we just get trolled loads and loads and loads. And that prevents us from feeling we have that equality to take part. So it is really important. It leaps into real life, as I've just said, and we've all seen with the strangulation porn. And it trains people, men and women, boys and girls, who see content which they shouldn't be seeing, which is pushed onto them by algorithms. It's not that people seek it out, it comes to them, and those algorithms grow exponentially. It doesn't take very long to register a social media account before, if you're a boy, if you register as a boy, before you'll get some porn. So there are some serious consequences of what's happening online in real life, and we need to start acting about that. And also, I guess the other thing is small minorities, which probably most of us know, can make a very loud noise online, can't they? So I expect if I say Andrew Tate, you will all have heard of Andrew Tate. And that's one of the problems with online violence against women and girls. So I've talked a bit about equality. This is quite a complex slide, so I'll slow down a little bit for it. We know that the root causes of violence against women and girls are inequality. And it starts, if you look at the bottom end of that arrow, the starting of it all is around beliefs and attitudes. And those beliefs and attitudes which say that women aren't worth the same as men, that women are sexual objects, that women are not as good as, they're not the same, they don't deserve the same chances and choices. So it's harmful gender stereotypes that begins in, and those beliefs and attitudes are displayed in real life by what's sometimes called microaggressions and harassment. I can't see my own slides from where I am because my eyesight's not good enough. But I'm sure you can read through that line. And it starts with jokes and comments and banter and humiliation and just treating women as objects. It moves through those criminal acts. And at the far end of that spectrum of violence against women and girls, we've got physical assault, sexual assault, rape and murder. And in order to translate that into real life, I'm going to use a really unpleasant example, which is the murder of Sarah Everard, which you might have read about because it was very highly publicised. Sarah Everard was murdered by a serving police officer, so there was a big investigation into what had happened. So we have a lot of evidence, and we know that Wayne Couzens, who murdered her, when he joined the workforce as a young man, he had those beliefs and attitudes in that first column. And he displayed them by making jokes, comments, trying to humiliate women, invading their personal space. He moved along that spectrum. His first criminal acts were indecent exposure. And then finally, with the murder of Sarah Everard, he kidnapped Sarah Everard, raped her, murdered her and burnt her body. We know that if anybody had intervened at any point along that spectrum of violence, Sarah Everard might be alive today. So that is a really good example of why something that you think might not be very important, because it's down in the bottom end of that spectrum, including a lot of things that happen online, comments, jokes, memes, misogynistic pictures. People on your family WhatsApp may be making comments that you don't like, that you haven't done anything about. It really matters down in that bottom end, because if we let that go, if we let it slide, we don't comment on it, then we are accepting it as a level of behaviour, and then it becomes easier for people to move to the next level, to the next level, to the next level. So that's why it's important that we all intervene. Sorry for focusing on that for such a long time. There are things that we can all do, not just men, but all of us, but it's important to listen to women's experiences and make space for women's voices, especially online, because that is one of the consequences, that we don't feel we can tell our stories online because of what happens if we do. It's really important that none of us join in with sexist jokes or comments online, that we don't forward things on, that we challenge where we can, that you delete that post from the family WhatsApp, or you stand up to the person that put it. You can mute, you can block, you can unfollow pages with misogynistic comments. If you know anything about social media, which I don't, you can make a For You page, which I believe is some kind of home page to do with your Instagram account, which is positive. So in other words, you're pushing equality and positivity online all the time. And that's one of the most powerful things you can do. And obviously having conversations with people around you about how online becomes offline very quickly, and how those very first early behaviours really matter. I'm just coming to the end of my allotted time. So thank you to so many people for wearing a white ribbon. I've got a white ribbon on here. It's usually upside down. It's the right way today. Thank you for wearing that. You can wear it every day. You don't just have to wear it at this time of year. You can encourage men to wear it too. You can wear it at home, at work, in the supermarket. Everyone can make the white ribbon promise to never use, excuse, or remain silent about men's violence against women. If you do remain silent, that isn't being neutral. You have made a choice to condone that behaviour. So I encourage everybody here to encourage everybody else that they know to make that promise. Thank you.
Very good. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Lynn. Our final speaker this morning is Matt Taylor. He is the Senior Perpetrator Policy Programme Manager, Violence Against Women, Domestic Abuse and Sexual Violence Team, Welsh Government. That's a nice small title. And he's also a White Ribbon Ambassador. Matt's focus is on primary prevention work, covering policy and projects that aim to intervene before harm takes place. So it's a nice follow-through from what has just been said. Matt's role spans the devolved and the non-devolved landscape. He works across criminal justice agencies and also Welsh communities. Matt's work with the Sound campaign has seen him travel internationally to provide advice and guidance on routes to engaging men and boys and allies and agents of change. Over to you.
Wow. Prynawn da, everyone, I think, or afternoon by now. It's really, really hard to follow such, I suppose, expertise. And so I think, we talk about some of the people on the stage today, that they made this a lifelong commitment. And I think it's really hard for me to stand up along here and be able to follow that, but I'm going to do my best. As you mentioned briefly, that I'm a White Ribbon Ambassador. I've been working with White Ribbon since I joined the prison service in 2010, so we're probably about 15 years in now. And one, it resonates with me on a personal level, so something that I tend to always reflect on is not in my name. And I think for me, as my personal ownership, is the what can I do? And these behaviours that other men and boys carry out should not be in my name. And in terms of what I expect of my son, for example, is that he won't live in the shadow of men like that. And I'm really fortunate to be able to sort of take my ambassadorship and merge it with my policy work. So as the Cabinet Secretary have noticed, I work for the Cabinet Secretary, Jane Hutt. My specific focus is on violence against women, domestic abuse and sexual violence. And as what we've heard from some our other experts here, that we need to work with men and boys. We need to work with men and boys to give them agency. We know that there's appetite there, But what we need to be able to do is to transfer their appetite into ownership. And I'll talk a little bit about online ownership and some of the work that I've been doing with Welsh Government and White Ribbon in terms of my day job. So online harms connected to violence against women and girls are increasingly complex. It's not simple. It's not a simple picture. It's wide-ranging. It's deeply interconnected with offline abuse. We've heard of that. What transfers from the online world transfers into real world. As similar as those standards we set in organisations where we work, those standards then trickle through to home, and home trickles through to community. So it's an absolute route. Unfortunately, they become extensions of everyday life, meaning the risks women and girls face are no longer confined to physical environments. Instead, technology enables new forms of abuse while amplifying that what already exists. And something that Olga mentioned earlier is about having localised data. So part of Olga's Four Nations report, we actually got some disaggregated data for Wales. So when I have data to be able to base policy decisions on, it's really key that we have Welsh-specific data that we can use for Welsh people. I know that one of the recommendations from the White Ribbon report will call for localised data. When we're actually using data about our people, we can deliver policy better, because ultimately that's why we do policy, is for the benefit of everyone in Wales. In terms of online harm, one major facet is online harassment. It includes targeted abuse, misogynistic comments, threats, coordinated pylons. These behaviours, they escalate rapidly and create an environment where misogyny becomes normalised. And for many young women and girls, this is a routine feature of social media. It leads to emotional distress and withdrawing from online spaces. We've heard similar to when we've done some work in Sound Phase 3, was looking at public sexual harassment and the impact that exercising during the night can have. This time of year that we'll see a lot of change of behaviour, but we don't want to keep asking women and girls to change their behaviour. We want to be able to change their behaviour that informs that. Another layer involves image-based abuse. Non-consensual sharing of internet images, upskirting, deepfakes, use of AI-generated sexual content. And these forms of abuse can be relentless. They're difficult to remove. You have a digital footprint. It's really hard to remove that. They can be absolutely devastating for victims. And the permanence and replicability, I'm surprised I got that word right, of digital content means the harm can feel unending. This is a journey. This is a lifetime of harm that can follow you around. Online harms also include coercive control facilitated by technology. The abusers may use tracking apps, spyware, social media monitoring to control and intimidate partners. Technology can and does extend an abuser's reach. It allows them to invade a survivor's privacy even when the relationship has ended. A further dimension of this is the culture of misogyny that thrives online, where forums, influencers and algorithm-driven platforms can and do promote harmful gender stereotypes. With Phase 4 of our Sound campaign, we had a look at how often are young men being served such content. And young men and Gen Z are being served content that they're not actually searching for. What algorithms are doing that, they're picking up, male, Welsh, under 25, must like this content. And they spew and they feed that harmful narrative into impressionable young boys and young men. The cultural backdrop conditions boys and young men to view disrespect and abuse as normal or humorous, and it contributes to long patterns of harm. But ultimately, online abuse is multifaceted, as I mentioned. It spans individual behaviours, technology systems, social norms, and the structural inequalities. Addressing it effectively requires a holistic approach that brings together education, platform accountability, community engagement, and importantly, survivor support. So legislation to address technology-facilitated abuse is vital, but it will never be sufficient on its own. The laws and legislation can punish offenders, they can set standards for platforms and provide mechanisms for redress. Yet they operate only after harm has occurred or at the point of enforcement. The deeper challenge lies not just in the tools being misused, but in the culture that feeds that misuse in our communities. So technology does not create misogyny or abuse, it amplifies what already exists. Abusers use the digital platforms to harass, threaten, control, exploit women because the underlying attitudes that permit such behaviours are still pervasive. We cannot legislate our way out of a cultural problem. Real lasting change requires transforming the attitudes, beliefs and social expectations to shape how people behave online. This means educating boys and men about respect, consent, challenge those harmful narratives that spread in the digital spaces, and create online cultures where abuse is called out rather than ignored. By ignoring it, you're complicit in it, and I think that's a key message around White Ribbon. We've seen and heard some startling figures and examples from my colleagues now about what do we do, how do we challenge this? So engaging men and boys to prevent the violence against women, domestic abuse and sexual violence is fundamental to our efforts, and it's fundamental to my role, Welsh Government. And a conduit for this has been one of the conduits we have, as you've seen of my really long job title, is of a programme of activity, have many projects. And one of our many projects about directly engaging with men and boys has been through a communications campaign. So the Welsh Government Sound Comms campaign encourages men and boys to learn about aspects of violence against women, reflect on unhealthy and harmful behaviours, and to sound it out with other men. So the Sound is not a perpetrator campaign. It looks at early harms and attitude that we heard from Olga earlier. It's about bringing men into a conversation without calling them perpetrators. It's looking at how often or how quickly can we get in and intervene, and that involves intervening across the community level. That involves schools, education settings, youth clubs, sports settings, anywhere where there are men who can act as positive role models and positive peers. So we now move on to phase 4, which segues nicely into online harm, because phase 4 we're going to be concentrating on online harms, and that will be our vehicle to approach men and boys directly. To date, we've collaborated with many agencies that, one, they enable us to send our message. We see it in communities, but also it acts as a springboard for us. I know our work was very well received by White Ribbon, and Lynn and her colleagues have taken that to Westminster. If you look at the impressions that we've had for our sound campaign, bear in mind we're only a nation of 3.7 million people. We've had over 20 million clicks or 20 million hits. The opportunities to see have gone global, so it's around 1.6 billion, and that is from two of us, myself and Nick Cowan, my boss sat there, so I'm on best behaviour, I was the cab sec and the boss there, is that from a very small investment, we knew we were doing the right thing. We know that managed to cascade through the world, so we know that we got interest from the United Nations, we got interest from the government in New Zealand, I was lucky enough to spend some time there. And it's all about that collaboration, because we need people to be able to deliver that. So whether we're collaborating with other government departments and other agencies, as we do through our governance structure, through our blueprint, is that we need people in the community, and that involves running clubs. For example, Cardiff Running Clubs, we work with Athletics Wales, boxing clubs, gyms, Football Association of Wales, Cardiff Rugby, and a host of other influencers at community level. So phase 4 I mentioned, we'll start looking at what we call those formative behaviours, and they for us are stalking, tracking and harassment. And our approach has been to identify what the problem is, because we know we're working with some men. They didn't understand what violence was. They understood physical abuse and sexual violence, but they don't understand all the nuances and all the terminology, all the acronyms. But by educating men and boys through our campaign, what we could do is we can draw parallels. We can highlight what the behaviour is, and then we can start talking about conversations that how to stop the behaviour, how to call out the behaviour, how we set the behaviour as not acceptable. And why do we need men and boys in this? I think because they're influential in their online spaces. They dominate a lot of online spaces, gaming environments, social media sort of spaces. Their voices, behaviours and willingness to intervene can significantly can shape the tone or culture of these spaces. Prevention requires cultural change, not just regulation. Engaging men and boys helps challenge these norms at the source and reduces the social acceptance of harmful behaviour. And by that, we know that men and boys can then interrupt, so there's interrupting techniques amongst their peers. And ultimately, by getting men and boys to take some ownership, it reduces the burden on women and girls. So women should not be solely responsible for navigating, reporting, fighting back against misogynistic harm that's overwhelmingly directed at them. When men and boys contribute to solutions, they help create safer, more respectful environments for all. And through Welsh Government, our evaluation campaign shows that men wanted to talk, but there were barriers to it. And some of those barriers included having nowhere to go and sort of feeling judged around elements of their masculinity. It wasn't cool to ask silly questions. It was quite harmful. They felt as though they were putting themselves in a perpetrator space by wanting to ask and to understand the problem better. So what we're looking to do is try and provide spaces where they can ask questions, they can get sound advice, and that advice it stands up, it's helpful, not harmful advice, And we've been working with our current project. We've teamed up with White Ribbon to develop White Ribbon sound ambassadors. So we've moved away from using social media influencers to carry the message. Now we're drawing down to community ambassadors, and we've got some in the room. I can see Dan at the back, and I'm going to glass, so I can't see anybody else, who are currently on the programme. And that means delivering White Ribbon ambassadors in line with the sound campaign. And that means those who we use in our campaign, the Call Men Forward, we actually provide training. So when they go back to their communities, where they have that influence, that they have those groups of men and boys that look up to them, they can carry that message and they can pay it forward. I think as we move forward, our sound campaign continues to call men and boys to be part of the solution, to listen, to learn, and to importantly step up. When they understand the harm online violence causes, they gain the power to challenge it and help build digital communities where everyone is treated with dignity and respect. Thank you.
Thank you, Matt. I want to open up the floor now to delegates to ask questions and to speakers, or to even make a general comment. For those delegates joining online, please add your question or comment to the chat function. Please give your names and try to keep your questions short, because we want to get through as many questions or observations as possible. I'm opening up the floor. Okay, we've got some hands. We've got one there, and one there, and one there.
Oh, loads of questions. That's good.
Thank you for putting on this. It's been really informative. Obviously, when we're talking about tech abuse, we must see how this is predominantly happening to young women as we live our lives increasingly online. We run a campaign called Time to Act Cardiff University, which is based in the uni, tackling sexual violence. We get a shocking amount of abuse towards us. We've had members doxed on incel websites. We've had our articles pulled apart, and we've had rape threats. Personally, even now, I'm being harassed online by an ex-partner, but our university doesn't take this seriously at all. We've been told by our university on multiple occasions, that they cannot police student spaces online, or even at all. But when incidents have happened, even to us as activists on sexual violence, we are not taken seriously or with respect. How can we get our university institutions to listen to us about this real issue, because students are scared and sickened of this behaviour, and our university and SU is nowhere to be found with tackling this issue which bleeds into their campus?
Thank you. We'll take three, and then we'll come back.
I'm Stephanie Grimshaw from Welsh Women's Aid. Thank you for talking about this really important issue. We mentioned Ofcom and kind of the powers that they have. One of my concerns is the barriers that are put in place in terms of generative AI are not working, the safeguards are not working, and all Ofcom have done is they've sent out a public letter to say, please do as you're told, to these kind of software programmers and things like that. My frustration is, we would never allow cars on the road that didn't have proper seat belts that were working. So why are we allowing online software to have safeguards that aren't working? This kind of idea that the online space is this special space that is not connected to anything else is no longer the way that the world works. And I think that it's really, really problematic that the legislation doesn't work and the safeguards don't work. And if it was, to go back to my point, if it was anything else, it wouldn't be allowed to happen. And just because it's an online space, it's allowed to happen. And I also think, to put a kind of feminist perspective on it, part of the problem is that all these programmers and software companies are owned by men, and it's controlled by the patriarchy. So I know Ofcom is more of a kind of a non-devolved issue, but how are we going to put the mechanisms in place to force these software companies to actually make sure the safeguards are working? Because if Ofcom are the ones that are meant to be doing it, and all they're going to do is send out a public letter to ask them kindly not, you know, to do their jobs, and women are being faced to suffer the consequences of that lack of action. So kind of when are we going to see that proper action?
Okay, and we had one at the back. Thank you.
Good afternoon. I'm Helen Skirfield and I'm Sir Optimist International Wales South. You talked a lot about contacting 16 to 24-year-olds. We recently had our conference in Birmingham, and one of our national organisations, SI Temperance in Trinidad and Tobago, did a fantastic project called Think Before You Click. They didn't only target boys, they targeted girls and boys, and some of those girls were already being drawn into online abuse, and they were able to discuss with their classmates the problems they were facing and explaining to their friends, their peers, what effect that had on them. This type of program can be rolled out in education everywhere. It's would be an international rollout of Think Before You Click. That was the title of their program. On another project with media, you were saying about online abuse, awful videos coming. I found out from my own hairdresser that her stepson actually came across a video on his phone, and the horror of it all was it was sexual activities between his father and her over a period of 10 years, which had also been posted on the dark web. Now, the awful thing is that she did report it to the police, and she's been going through hell and depression, as you can imagine, because, as you said, once it's there, it stays there. The unfortunate thing is with that he started going out with another woman before he came to court, and unfortunately, that woman's images of sexual activities with him is now on the dark web. Why aren't these things acted upon quicker? Why isn't he stopped? He was arrested, it hasn't come to court yet, and this is 18 months on, and she's still in the depths of despair. Thank you.
Okay. Right, I thank you for those questions. I am going to ask people who are to take the first question first, certainly. The safeguarding issues around Cardiff University, and answer.
Do you want Olga to... Is Olga in the panel?
Oh, and Olga. Well, I don't know. Is she still
I
on?
am.
Do we still have Olga? Yeah, we still
she's
have
still
Olga,
on
because
that.
I think she will have a lot to say about the first and the second, well, and the third. She'll have a lot to say about all of them, and I don't want to steal her thunder. But you've looked at me, Joyce, so I'm going first, and maybe we'll come on to Olga afterwards. The university campus question is awful, isn't it? And that is a really good example of people being activists, women giving their opinions in a public space and then suffering as a result of that, and the university saying they can't do anything about it. I know that Olga, I can see Olga now. Hi, Olga. I know that Olga agrees with me in the sense that your rights online are your human rights, and that's partly what the definition from the Council of Europe is talking about. And White Ribbon have just released today in Wales a joint report with Olga and the Centre for Protecting Women Online. And one of the things that talks about, one of the recommendations in that report, is that we have to make our rights, our digital rights, a human right. And we need the government to back that up and follow up on their agreements with the Council of Europe about that, because we all have a right to live our lives in safety. And that's women as well as men, and it counts digitally as well as in real life. So it's not good enough to say we can't do anything about it. There's always something that can be done about it. That the police can be involved, action can be taken, and it's not an impossible topic that they just can't handle. It can be handled. So I know that Olga will say more about that as well, and I guess it links up for me with that Ofcom question that we don't really have, and again, this is what the report is saying, that we don't have enough powerful regulatory legislation. We've agreed to all kinds of international laws about this topic, but we're not actually following them up with legislation, and we do need to do that because tech companies are there to make a profit, and that is what private companies do by law. So unless you legislate against them doing that and require them to take action, they will not do that. And at the moment, their algorithms are driven by violence and abuse towards women because that's one of the things that makes them profit and gets them lots of clicks. So unless we actually legislate against that, nothing is going to change. I'm going to shut up because I think I'm just saying what Olga's going to say, really.
Olga.
Thank you. I'm sorry I didn't catch the first member of the audience name, but first of all, I'm really sorry to hear about what happened to you and your colleagues as well. I hope you managed to get support from some of the organizations in Wales that can provide that support to you. There are really no excuses for universities not to act, especially universities in Wales. And this is, I think, where the devolved things come in. Wales has this magic piece of legislation. I mean, maybe it's not magic, but I think when it came into force, I was very happy, called Violence Against Women, Domestic Abuse and Sexual Violence Act, that uniquely places obligations on public bodies to actually have a plan to address violence against women and girls in all its forms. So I really hope that whilst perhaps it's not going to remedy your particular situation in the next, days, minutes, hours, I really hope that it can be used to tackle the kind of the localized impact of online violence that we're seeing. In terms of universities, I think this is something that we face across the sector. I'm very familiar with what you said about universities saying they cannot police online activities. Very often the example that is given is that they wouldn't go into pubs and police what students are saying to one another. That's simply no excuse, and it's not quite good enough because the action is possible when we're talking about the use of ChatGPT in assessments. So I think action is possible, it's just taking painfully slow to take effect. In terms of the two other questions, Stephanie, I absolutely agree with what you said about Ofcom. I think Ofcom has emerged out of the whole Online Safety Act exercise as a bit of a toothless tiger when it comes to violence against women and girls. Personally, I think it's a huge missed opportunity, particularly in context of law reform, because let's face it, we're not going to out of a sudden put resources into redoing Online Safety Act, given how long it has taken to get there, and it has taken quite a few years. I think it's particularly problematic that any guidance to platforms is entirely voluntary. Ofcom have consulted on the issue, and unfortunately, it is once again pushed into this kind of margin of, well, if you want to act, you can act. We think it would be good for you to act. With all due respect to platforms, I think they're very much aware of what is going on. After all, they are businesses and they are for profit. And combating violence against women and girls and misogynistic content is not quite good for profit, as we see from research, because it generates more clicks, it generates audience, and that is very profitable for advertising. This somewhat oversimplifies the more nuanced picture of it, but I hope it conveys kind of the interests that are also at stake here. And I'm very sorry, my Zoom dropped when the third question was being asked. So I think I'm not going to attempt to answer that because I don't think I fully heard it. But thank you.
Thank you. I can't read. What does it say? Shout it out.
I can't read that.
Ah, yeah. Okay. So I'm sorry, I had to put my glass on. I'll actually see what my notes are over there. So I think if I go through the first question from Cardiff Union, I think it sounds really personal, and I'm sorry that you've had that sort of personal element. But I'm glad that you show the strength to talk about it and to do it. And I think using that platform is that there are power in numbers, and like, I'd never give up. And I think what you have there is you have an understanding, you have an examples of the problem. Unfortunately, whilst and I agree with what Olga said, is that if you're in the pub, universities don't police you in the pub, but what they can do is you have a set of expectation of our students and of our alumni, and there should be a code of conduct similar as you might have where I know some university rugby teams who had some forgettable behaviour, if you like, that should tie in. Similar when you put a uniform on or you put a badge on, you work to the standard of that uniform. So for me, I think there's likely some work in terms of looking at what sort of students these organisations want and what are their values and expectations of those students. I'd remember that, I just remind you that sometimes you can always write to your assembly member, your local councillor, and to seek some support that way. And then I loved Stephanie's analogy. It's like an MOT. I was writing it's just like an MOT. It's something that's fit for purpose. As Welsh Government, we have worked with Ofcom in terms of try and provide some steer on the legislation, but we don't get much of a say, but what we do is that we can draw evidence and we can expect more of Ofcom. I think you're right in terms of there's more power required, and there are more voices needed. So, like you've given those examples, I think it's having those real lived experiences that should be informed. So we talk about an evidence base, but also within that comes the narrative of how it affects people. And I just bringing it back to what Lynn said about there's a commercial element to these, and that ultimately, if it hits their bottom line, that's when I think that it'll start to take effect. And as I mentioned in some of my words earlier, that we cannot rely on the platforms to be able to sort this out for us, because it's the culture that feeds them. But we should have an expectation on the powers that they have for them to be able to give them a bit of agency to inform change. And lastly, from these comments from us optimists, in Welsh Government, so the campaign aimed at 18 to 24-year-olds in the main, but sound because it's quite dynamic in its approach. So it can broach that and work in other areas. So we could work with younger children or with older people. But also we've invested significantly this year with Story Cymru, who go out to schools. They do that work in schools. I know there's a call this morning we heard about. There's one thing working with the students, but we've got to work with the staff who are facilitating it, with teachers, to equip them with the skills, and not just skills, the confidence to have those conversations. There's a lot of fears around safeguarding. You get forwarded to a safeguarding lead who knows that form perfectly in terms of making a referral. But how do we stand the wider context in terms of recognising why that referral is needed? And something I saw, aside from the sound stuff, the Story Cymru stuff, we're trying to work with children and young people. We sponsored a book called This Is Not Yours to Carry, and that, I think we launched that last month, and that is with an author from New Zealand, Sarah Brown, and that is trying to work with children and young people. The earliest opportunity to try and explain that this abuse is not theirs to carry. It's not their fault, and there are other avenues of support. Another particular project I liked that I saw on Friday night on Children Need was another White Ribbon project, not in England or Wales, but in Northern Ireland, where they had young people who were going out and working directly with young people in schools. And one thing we've heard from education, and certainly from students, is they don't want these lessons by their teacher. They don't want that authoritative figure. They want somebody who's a bit more their age, is a bit more nuances, and it's about that face in front of you where you can break down those barriers and call out really courageous conversations.
Thank you. Are there any questions online? Because I can't see any.
Hi. Yeah, there's a question from Andrea Cooper. She says, very interesting presentations, thank you all. I'd like to highlight the recent report published by Dewis Choice, which focused upon the impacts and harms of tech-enabled abuse experienced by older people. It's sometimes assumed that older people are not affected by this type of harm and abuse because, for example, of issues of digital exclusion. However, it's this very digital exclusion that can increase risk for some people. I agree that we need data to increase understanding of the levels of this type of abuse. This data should be disaggregated to ensure that we have data for all age groups. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. And there's somebody at the back I can't see.
Sorry, I'm a bit short. My name's Dan. I'm a National Development Manager for Delalia Rugby Berks. I'm also one of the White Ribbon and Sound brand ambassadors. So in my role, I work with a lot of young people in a lot of schools across England and Wales. So my question is focused more on young people. Firstly, I think it's time that we need to recognise that the real world and the online world are no longer separate entities in the eyes of the young people and the effects it has on their lives. As a dad to a young girl and a uncle to numerous nieces, online abuse of young girls is a very personal issue for me, especially at the moment with a neurodiverse girl within my family currently experiencing this through various channels, including Roblox and WhatsApp. This has had a huge detrimental effect on her mental health and well-being and difficulties with her feeling safe in school. Now, there's been multiple attempts to work with the school who, to be fair, want to help, and also multiple attempts to work with the families of the girls responsible, but so far nothing has worked. There's also been issues within this year group around the boys in the class making offensive comments and threats of violence online in group chats, using language that can often be attributed to certain types of influencers online. These are Year 7 children, so they're 10, 11 years old. In addition to this, previously in a coaching role, I've seen boys access OnlyFans material involving classmates' mums and use it to bully and humiliate them within the school grounds. Should Wales be looking at what Denmark are proposing and ban social media for under 15s or potentially even older? And should we go further and call out irresponsible parents and carers who don't monitor online activity and are ignorant to the damage that young people can cause online?
Thank you. And one over here.
Hi, I'm Dr Ruth Mullineau from NSPCC Cymru, and I'm also a researcher focusing on children's voices about their experiences of being groomed online. I'd like, I guess, pick up a little bit on the previous question and some of the comments made so far around the legislation we have in Wales under the Valdez-V Act, and how do we harness those powers to sort of forefront online harms, tech-assisted violence against women and girls in our strategy around Valdez-V, and then also thinking about the kind of continuum of these issues. How do we create a kind of coherent approach, looking at CSA strategies? We have a strategy on developing resilience in education. How do we join all of that up to harness the powers that we do have for Wales?
Okay, thank you. Right. We've got 3 questions. We'll start with you this time.
Okay. 3 really good questions, and I was trying to scribble down in my notes, but I've only got one blank sheet, so I'll... just in the online comments around the experiences of older people, and I think that whilst we've mentioned a little bit about children and young people, that we also, Wales is made up of many people of many ages, and I think that, as was correctly noted, is that we do need a better understanding of how, I suppose, how the harm looks for older people, how their ability to interact with technology. We're talking about regulators insisting that there are tighter controls within your app. If you don't use an app or can't understand and use the app in the first place, it's a little harder to turn them off. So I think it definitely requires a better understanding of what those needs look like. And to come on to Dan's thing quickly, I think it's a real challenge, and I think it's, I've got a daughter who's 11, who does have a phone. She doesn't have social media. I think, what we try to do is have a look at what parenting controls, what technology controls are there, but not everybody can do that, and I think it's a real question, or there's a real pressure on parents, and I certainly feel it, to be able to, one, educate myself around what the harm looks like. Certainly, we saw that, documentaries like, well, not documentaries, but it was adolescence, and I think that brought it home. We all knew that was there, but I think that was an absolute catalyst and a springboard for it, that put those conversations, and those conversations that the parents in that in that program ask us, that is there anything we could have done different? So I think it's about establishing an understanding of what parents want, how can we equip them with better skills and techniques, So I don't know if that answers all your question, but I think there's a definite need, and I certainly feel as a parent that I need more information to make the right decision, and whether removing the technology is the best way, or whether it's about upskilling those who want access to the technology in the first place is another way. And thirdly then, I think, absolutely spot on, we have, you mentioned the Vowder SV Act, that's, is 10 years old now, and what we know about abuse, and certainly with the advent of technology, is that changes, and our strategy, I suppose, it looks to evolve. We have the Act as a basis which we can pivot on, but how we respond is delivered through our strategy, and luckily, I think, next year, our current strategy runs out in 2026, and we have a golden opportunity now. And we have a golden opportunity in terms of how, like through some of Lynn's calls, looking at more longitudinal funding, better evaluation periods. We can run things for longer, so we can understand things better. But that involves making a commitment around funding and financing. So for me, I think just to offer some confidence that back to you is that we know the strategy is changing as an evolving document, and it will change based on the evidence that we have, and we know the evidence of online abuse absolutely merits having a dedicated effort and response to it.
Do you want Olga next one?
Olga.
Thank you. I very much agree with what Matt has said. I mean, for my part, I've been a huge fan of the 2015 Wales Act, because it's been such a nice addition to the legislative landscape. But it's just lawyer in me being excited about legal stuff. But it's due, it's going to celebrate its 10-year anniversary, and the world was very different in 2015. And when this piece of legislation was being created was, of course, before 2015. Technology that was out there was very different in 2015. We were, I think, at the dawn of what we're witnessing now in terms of technology-facilitated vogue. So I think I'm a huge believer that this piece of legislation can be operationalized in a way that helps tackle particularly effects of online harms that stem from various forms of technology-facilitated abuse. And for my part and the centre's part, we would be absolutely delighted to work together with Welsh Government on trying to make it happen, and perhaps show the way how this piece of legislation can be refreshed to incorporate the current challenges that we're facing, because I do believe, for one, that it is possible. I also want to briefly go back on the question about kind of responsibilities and the social media ban, which it's a hugely controversial topic, and I'm not going to pretend that I'm going to unpack it in a minute or so. But I just wanted to really sound a voice of caution over social media bans altogether. I can completely see merit in that, and I think that when you're seeing young people being affected by what's happening online versus the slow and sometimes non-existent response and support mechanisms, the first kind of reaction and a natural one is like, well, let's get off it. But there are also benefits of being in digital spaces, particularly for young people. As I think Matt has said, for young people, these worlds are, and for all of us actually, not just for young people, these worlds are interconnected. I'm joining you today online. Perhaps a few years ago, I wouldn't be able to do it pre-pandemic. I think it's important that we don't lose sight of the benefits that digital spaces bring, both in terms of, particularly for young women and girls, in terms of their participation in all things digital, not only social media, but digital industry more broadly, their career development, their right to be in those spaces on equal terms, and terms that respect their dignity, that are free of violence. And there's also then a question about, women, the young women and girls wanting to also pursue careers that are oriented towards technology, that they have their voices in those spaces where, as future software engineers, as future, AI leaders, because the diversity of these voices matter, and it really matters to have them represented in those spaces. My worry is that if we say, okay, withdraw, don't participate, let's ban it for everybody, we're actually regressing rather than addressing the problems that are more structural that we are now witnessing in online spaces.
Thank you.
Gosh, yeah, 3 really big questions, aren't they? And really difficult to kind of tackle any of them in the time that we've got. Agree with everything that Matt has said, and also agree with Olga. I'm going to start with Dan at the back and the question about banning social media for the same reason, really, because it is quite controversial, isn't it? I completely agree. There are benefits to the digital world. There are lots of benefits to AI. I think we would be naive if we think we can roll that back, but we do have to do something different, don't we? And I agree with you there, Dan. I've got a grandson who already wants to play with my watch, with my phone, he wants to watch videos. He's 18 months old. We know we've got lots of research that tells us things on screens move too fast for developing brains and that we need to be more careful. So it is that awful dilemma we have as kind of humankind, really, that we don't anticipate well enough, do we? We don't think about the dangers that we're stepping into. We're very keen on all the benefits. We like all the benefits, and we don't think about how we're going to manage that going forward and what the problems might be. I don't think we will roll it back, but I do think social media is a different thing to the rest of the digital world, isn't it? And I think what you're saying is, could we do something with that chunk of digital that maybe protects people who are younger until they get older? And I know obviously I'm 63, I grew up in a totally non-digital world. My children are in their 40s, so they grew up kind of pre-social media, so they had all the benefits of the digital world of going online and playing games, but none of the disadvantages of social media. So if I look at them compared to the next generation, they really lucked out because they got all the benefits and none of the disadvantages. And I do think we do need to think about how do we control it in young children and in young people as they're growing up, because the effects on people's mental health are huge and they are lifelong, and so we're all dealing with them now, aren't we? And we're beginning to deal with them now. I think there is something about individual education so that we can be more savvy as children and as parents and as grandparents about what people are looking at. I think we've got this huge problem anyway about digital online violence that we don't recognise it ourselves very well, even though we're all in this room talking about it. We've all got some examples. I'm going to use that patriarchy word, which has already been used once, but we do live in a patriarchy, and I don't want us to subject our young people to thinking it exists online just the same as it does in real life, because it doesn't have to, does it? So we need to stop that from happening. So I'm really torn about that ban. I want it for my own family. I can see how hard it is. I also know as a parent that I don't know that I could stop my 3 teenagers from doing anything they were determined to do. And I don't know how I would, as a parent or a grandparent, manage that, because I want them to make their own mistakes and to learn, and I don't want to control everything they're doing. But I do want to instill in them a sense of responsibility and personal responsibility for the world they live in. So, wow, that was a complicated question that you asked there. I don't know what the answer is. I would just be really interested, if we're allowed to, just ask for a show of hands of who would be in favour of a ban for young children and young people. A ban from... Oh, does it depend on the age? Tell us an age, Dan. 15 for people under 15. Oh, okay. So not so many. Oh, some people are not sure. If it was 10, would more people be okay? So I think we as an audience probably are fairly reflective, aren't we? We can see the harm for really young children. We understand that as older kind of teenagers, you've got to move into the adult world, and how do we manage all of that? It is really difficult. Thank you for such an inspiring question. I'm going to go away and rethink all of that, and probably next week I'll think I don't agree with anything I said on that day about that question, but we'll see what happens. Picking up the question about older people as well, I think it does raise something about intersectionality, which is one of those words that lots of people use, and I'm sure lots of other people don't understand what they mean. But we are not just women or men, are we? We're also people who are older or younger, or we have disabilities, or we're black, or we're white, or we're... All of those things make up our identities and how we experience things. So Yeah, I now experience things as an older person I didn't as a younger person. I quite like the invisibility of walking down the street. I don't when teenagers bump into me because they don't get out my way because I'm not there. And I think it's the same digitally, isn't it? Different skills, different behaviours. I think I will say from my own personal knowledge of my mum, who died not that long ago at age 93, in her generation and in her society, misogyny and sexism was totally acceptable, expected, understood. My mum even saw it as an advantage sometimes. So I think when we're thinking about older people, it is a different world. When we're thinking about younger people who get much more targeted, different world again, and we just need to think about all of that and how it affects everybody. And I guess I'm not qualified to say how the Welsh Government pulls everything together. I do have a lot of confidence in what everybody is doing though, and I do agree with what Matt has said. Really, that's a question for Jane, isn't it? Because she's going to be really pivotal in making all that happen. So I think do as much influencing as you all can really with your government to say, here is this golden opportunity. Yeah, thank you.
Right. As always, time has defeated us. But I'm going to thank you all for your contributions. Coming back to the NSPCC, there is a relaunch of the policy. I know because I'm hosting it. And I know it's in February. It was supposed to be this week, but it's been, perhaps it's being rethought. With additionalities. I don't know because I'm not in Cabinet. I'm making it up really. In terms of older people, I am an older person, and I think it's absolutely essential that we think about all people in this space. And you hear time and time again about older people being targeted because they don't understand. They've got technology, but they don't understand necessarily the threats. They're not in school, so they're not being taught. They're not in college, so they haven't got that. And very often they haven't got a cohort round them that is going to say, hang on, this isn't right, until it's too late, unfortunately. And not every older person have grandchildren neither, so it's worth thinking about that. And also families don't live necessarily in the same place anymore. So in terms of the school ban on phones, we've had this debate in the Senedd. I understand where it's coming from, and I'm just leaving it there on that one. I've got grandchildren too, and I think it's fair, this much is fair to say that parents do put blocks on, they do try their best, but kids are cleverer than their parents, and they undo it all again, or they find another way to join something else that the parents don't know about. I'm hearing the name of social media sites now I don't know exist. But anyway, I do apologise for those people who wanted to ask a question but we didn't get to. I want to thank Jill, who comes here and sits in the cold and takes questions every year. But I particularly want to thank Sarah and Rhian. Without those two, none of this would happen. I think somebody alluded to the fact that I had something to do with this. They've got to be joking. It would be a shambles. Organisational skills are not my strong point. So I really want to pay tribute to them. They drive it, and it doesn't happen today. It's months and months of work. I wish you, yes, absolutely, and it is. And it's a bit like, isn't it, when you have a secretary, you know, that old saying, behind every good man's a good woman, so that's why I want to particularly shine a light on their work. So this will be the last one I will be hosting as a Senedd member. I'm standing down. Will have done 19 years in this job, 31 years as an elected member. So I know about putting my head above the parapet and getting it shot at. So I wish you all well. I'm going to hand over to Jill, who's going to close. And I hope to see some of you this evening.
Well, it's been an interesting session. We've had lots of perspectives. We've concentrated on online abuse today, which of course we haven't been so targeted before. But Olga has reminded us that we've come such a long way since legislation came into being, the way we've concentrated on this issue in Wales and the Welsh Senedd wanting to make Wales the safest place for women to live. So thank you, Olga, for reminding us how far we have come. I think when we consider what we discussed at our first sessions here, we wouldn't have been thinking about working in schools, which we are doing now. The right guys with the right language are going into schools and starting at the beginning, really, to counteract misogyny. And it's a culture shift. It's a massive culture shift because, as Lynn said, you know, in grandparents' time, it was accepted, it was the norm, and we have to challenge the norms. So it's about getting young people on board. But I think the main thing for us really is that we cannot afford to stay silent on this issue. The White Ribbon Campaign, as its last point, talks about not remaining silent, and that means challenging people in our families or our friends, groups, wherever we are, something we're not happy about, call them out. I remember Matt giving a really, really strong comment. He was speaking a couple of months ago, and he used an example in his own life about going out with a couple of friends for a drink one evening and having a discussion. And one of the guys said something really misogynistic. And he had the strength of character and the right language to challenge right at the right moment. And once he had challenged, of course, his friends aligned with him, and it was the guy that had made the comments that was the one out in the outside, and he wanted to be part of the group. So he was then thinking about what he'd said and how he might say things differently in the future. And it wasn't that he had any particular bad thought in his head, but it's about the way we challenge other people about what they're saying and doing, but doing it at the right on the moment. It doesn't have to be massive speeches. It can be just something as simple. I didn't think you thought like that. That sort of thing. So thank you, everyone. So ar ran sefydliad y merched, hoffwn ystyn diolch yn fawr I bawb am ymuno â ni heddiw. Mewn person ni alain ac am ei gyffrandiau, diolch effed I aelodau y panel am rannu yw arbenigedd. So thank you to Jane Hutt, who of course has had to dash off for other, which is normal for Jane, she usually has to dash off. Cabinet Secretary for Social Justice. Thanks to Professor Olga Duretz, Lynn Elliott from Not In My Name, and Matt Taylor, also from here. Thank you for sharing your insights. But last but not least, I must extend the WI's thanks to Joyce Watson, with whom we've been organising these events since 2012. Joyce has been a friend of the WI for many years before she was elected in 2007 through her work with the Wales Women's National Coalition. Joyce, thank you for inviting the WI to get involved in this campaign. It's been a pleasure to work with you. You're a powerful advocate, and thank you for your tireless work and passion in making a difference and improving the lives of women and girls. So, diolch yn fawr iawn. Thank you. And this is stop press information. Joyce has said that she's going to join the WI. So a reminder to all of you that the candlelit vigil will be taking place on the steps of the Senedd this evening, starting at 6 o'clock. Please do join us if you can and encourage others to do so. Don't forget the hats, coats and gloves. If you'd like to have a photo taken with the Not in My Name pledge board, there'll be an opportunity for you to do this before you leave, if you didn't get a chance to do so at the start. We'd also like to take a group photo, so when we finally close, if we all go and position ourselves on that stairway, we can get a photo where we can see absolutely everyone, so that will be great. So please do join us before you dash off. The powerful artwork by Carol Kay will be on display upstairs in the Oriel until 3 o'clock, so please do have a look at that. So, diolch yn fawr eto ag gyffonagaeth a gobeithio gweld nifer ohonoch ar y wythnos a cwec o gloc a risiau Senedd. So thank you all very much indeed, and I hope to see you for the group photo on the steps. Thank you.